Let's talk about biblical accuracy in children's Bible stories. If you ever felt like your kids are not really connecting with scripture, I created a tool to help read the Bible with your kids in ways that grow honest imagination. It's a set of questions you can use right now, no prep required. The link is in the description below. Let's get into it. If you ever wondered if the Bible storybook you're reading to your kids is accurate, you're not alone. This is a question that I had and a problem that I've been trying to find a solution to for a long time. When it comes to what we're teaching our kids, accuracy is important to me. I think if you're watching this video, it's important to you too. We want our kids to understand and interact with scripture, but we also want that to be done in a way that is authentic and accurate. For me, everything starts with scripture. That's the basis of how I research stories for honest imagination. It's actually been really fun. The first story that I've written is called The Forgotten Nativity, a historically honest Christmas story. And I can't tell you how many times in the writing of this book, I would start to write something and then realize as I had the text sitting right next to me, that's not in there. And then ask the question, where did it come from? How has it gotten into all of these kids' books about the story of the birth of Jesus? And it's not in scripture. So, scripture is first for me. That is not something that's going to change. I'm careful to follow scripture when it does have details there, but in making a storybook for kids, there are places where scripture is silent, and those places are managed responsibly. This concept of honest imagination isn't something that's adding to the Bible, it's actually digging into it to see what's really there. Not only the text itself, but also the historical and cultural background that informs how we understand the story and also informs how we see the characters, how we understand their emotions, their everyday life, and it's a lot to work with. Digging into the cultural and historical background is not something that changes the meaning or adds meaning to scripture, but it does often make new themes appear where we have understood them differently in the West for a long time. It's about staying rooted in scripture while we use those details to make the story come alive. One question I get is if I'm adding things that aren't in the Bible. If something is clearly stated in scripture, that's what we go with. And if there are historical and cultural details that can inform the story, those things are brought up and considered in the illustrations and in the text itself. You might be asking, what about details that feel really unfamiliar? A good example of this is the inn and the innkeeper. This is a way that the Bible in English has been translated from the original text for a very long time that is now being corrected. The original text has always used the word kataluma. It's a Greek word that means guest room or space. This mistranslation from the original text has affected artwork about the birth of Jesus in the West, I think, for the entire history of having this story. Um, and it's being corrected now, which is really exciting to me. So, yes, these details in the stories of honest imagination might feel very unfamiliar, but they are not made up out of nowhere. They come from the actual historical text, they come from cultural details, they come from archaeological artifacts that we found, and it's all comes together to make a rich experience of scripture for you and your child. Is honest imagination theologically sound? When you start with scripture and you let scripture speak for itself and responsibly use details from culture and history, it's going to stay grounded. That's something you can count on. I spend time looking at how people live their daily life, what their architecture was like, the geography, the ways they would have traveled, different things like that. I also spend time looking at the original text in the Greek, the Hebrew, whatever it is, and looking for what scholars say about these things. Especially when making illustrations, every detail is thoughtfully considered. Nothing is arbitrary. It's actually really interesting how long it takes to do the illustrations because of researching details in such depth. It's good to ask questions when we're reading books with our kids. It's good for us to ask questions about scripture and to let our curiosity take us into a deeper understanding. of the story in scripture of this message that God has graciously given us and about who God is. We can trust that scripture is faithful and true and also explore it more deeply to understand the meaning more accurately. Honest imagination comes from a place of trusting scripture to speak for itself and also digging deeper into the background so that we can shed more light and understand it more accurately and more clearly. If you'd like a way to do this with your kids, you can download the guide in the description below that has ways to open up thoughtful conversation around scripture and dig into details that you may have never thought about before. And your kids can enjoy the process of having the freedom to ask questions, to think about it, to slow down, to chew on it more, and to use their honest imagination to inform their understanding of scripture. So, this historical and scripturally grounded approach is what's behind the first story that Honest Imagination is creating. It's called The Forgotten Nativity, a historically honest Christmas story. As you can imagine, the volume of facts and interesting details in the cultural background and historical background did not all fit in The Forgotten Nativity. And I'm also creating an Advent guide that will be available this fall for Advent preparation that is a way to learn about even more of those details in a very rich way with your family as you celebrate Advent. I don't believe we have to choose between faithfulness to Scripture and understanding it. I am pursuing both, and I hope you'll come along with me. Thank you for being here.